the day my daughter took the deed to my house for safekeeping. She kissed my forehead and told me I had enough to worry about. I believed her. 3 weeks later, the county clerk called and asked why the deed transfer paperwork for my Willow Creek home was missing the one page that required my signature. My daughter had told the clerk I was becoming forgetful. She said I had agreed to let her handle the property before something happened to me. But I had never agreed to sell my home. I had never signed a thing. And when the clerk read the date on the missing page, I realized my daughter had chosen the very day I was in the hospital after my fall. Subscribe and tell me in the comments. What would you do if your own child tried to move your home out from under you? My name is Rebecca Clark. I was 68 years old then, a widow, a retired library assistant, and the sole owner of a small brick ranch house on Willow Creek Road in Ohio. I had lived in that house for 34 years. My husband William and I bought it when the neighborhood still had more empty lots than homes. We painted the kitchen ourselves, one wall at a time, after working full shifts and putting money aside in a coffee tin above the refrigerator. William built the bookshelves in the den. I planted the hydrangeas by the front porch, with my mother's old gardening gloves tucked into my apron pocket. Every corner of that house held a piece of our life. The scratch in the hallway floor came from the day we brought our daughter Elaine home from the hospital in a stroller with one crooked wheel. The little dent in the baseboard near the laundry room came from William trying to carry a washing machine by himself because he hated asking anyone for help. After he passed, people asked whether the house felt too big. Sometimes it did, but it was not empty. It was mine. It was familiar. It was paid for. And after a lifetime of being careful, it was the one place where nobody could tell me when to eat, where to sit, or how much space I was allowed to take up. Elaine used to understand that. At least, I thought she did. She was 43, my only child, and for most of her life, I had described her as ambitious. I said it proudly, too. Elaine had always been the sort of girl who kept a planner in her purse and color-coded school assignments before teachers had even handed out the syllabus. She had a bright smile, quick hands, and a way of sounding capable even when she was asking for something she had no business asking for. After college, she had gone into real estate administration. Not an agent herself, exactly. She worked in an office that handled listings, contracts, and closing paperwork. She knew words like escrow and title transfer and market value the way I knew the Dewey Decimal System. For years, I thought that made her responsible. I did not understand that knowledge can become dangerous in the hands of someone who starts believing other people's property is simply an opportunity waiting to be managed. The trouble did not begin with the deed. It began with little questions. Mom, have you updated your emergency contacts? Mom, do you know where your will is? Mom, if you ever had to go somewhere for a few weeks, who would pay the bills? At first, those questions seemed reasonable. I had taken a bad fall in my kitchen the previous winter. Nothing dramatic. I had reached for a bowl on the top shelf, stepped backward without looking, and caught my heel on the edge of the rug. I fractured my wrist and bruised my hip badly enough to need a short hospital stay. It shook me. It shook Elaine even more. For the first 2 days, she sat beside my hospital bed with a worried crease between her eyebrows. She brought me clean socks, charged my phone, and corrected the nurse when someone called me Mrs. Collins instead of Mrs. Clark. I remember looking at her one evening as the snow pressed against the hospital windows and thinking how fortunate I was. "Don't worry," she said, squeezing my hand. "I'm going to help you get everything organized when you come home." I was tired. I was in pain. I was grateful. So I said, "That would be nice." Those 6 words became something much larger in Elaine's mind. When I got home, she started coming by twice a week. At first, she did helpful things. She picked up groceries. She replaced the battery in my smoke detector. She went through the stack of mail on my dining room table and separated the grocery flyers from the utility bills. Then she began moving things without asking. One Thursday afternoon, I found my checkbook missing from the drawer beside the telephone. Elaine said she had placed it in a blue folder with my bank statements. "You leave too much important stuff lying around," she said. It was in a drawer, and anyone could get into that drawer. I let it go. A week later, she asked for the spare key to my filing cabinet. "That cabinet is old," she said. The lock barely works. It works well enough for me. Mom, I'm not criticizing you. I'm trying to protect you. That was a phrase Elaine used often after the fall. I'm trying to protect you. Each time she said it, I felt foolish for resisting. The truth was, I hated becoming the mother who made life difficult for her child. I had watched too many women my age get dismissed as stubborn when they were simply trying to keep control of what belonged to them. I did not want Elaine to think I distrusted her. So one Saturday morning, while rain tapped softly against the kitchen window, I unlocked the filing cabinet and let her look through it. She pulled out the folder labeled House. Inside were my property tax notices, homeowners insurance papers, the mortgage satisfaction letter from the year William and I made our final payment, and the original deed. Elaine lifted the deed carefully, almost reverently. This should not be sitting in a metal cabinet in your dining room, she said. It has been sitting there for years. That does not make it safe. I smiled and told her William would have laughed at the idea that our old filing cabinet was a security risk. But Elaine did not smile back. Mom, please, she said. Let me put it in a lockbox at my apartment, just until we get you a proper safe. Her apartment was 20 minutes away, in a newer complex near the highway. I did not like the thought of my deed leaving my house, but she was standing there with such concern on her face that I felt almost cruel saying no. She kissed my forehead. You have enough to worry about, she said. Let me handle this one thing. So I handed it to her. That was the last time I saw the original deed. For the next 2 weeks, nothing seemed unusual. Elaine called more often, but I assumed she was checking on me. Then she began bringing up the house in a different tone. You know, places in Willow Creek are selling fast, she said one evening, while washing dishes I had not asked her to wash. I'm not selling, I know. I'm just saying you have options. I have always had options. She dried a plate slowly, keeping her eyes on the dish towel. What if you needed more care someday? I have long-term care insurance. What if it wasn't enough? Then I would speak to an attorney and make a decision. Elaine turned around. You don't have to do everything alone, Mom. I don't, I said. I have friends. I have Dr. Patel. I have an attorney whose card is still in my desk drawer. And I have you, when you are willing to be my daughter instead of my manager. The words came out sharper than I intended. For a moment, her face went still. Then she gave a small laugh that did not sound amused. You're making this into something it isn't. That sentence stayed with me after she left. Not because I knew what it meant then, but because I would hear it again later, in a place where the truth could not be laughed away. The call from the county clerk came on a Tuesday morning. I had just finished watering the hydrangeas. It was early spring, and the leaves were beginning to return after a long gray winter. I was standing at the sink rinsing dirt from my hands when the landline rang. Most people would have ignored it. I still answered my landline because William and I had kept the same number for 30 years, and because it was the number listed with the county records. Rebecca Clark speaking, I said. Mrs. Clark, this is Dana Mitchell from the recorder's office in Willow Creek. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. No. Is something wrong? There was a pause. I'm calling about a deed transfer packet that was submitted for your property on Willow Creek Road. I looked toward the front window, toward the house I could see reflected in the glass behind the kitchen sink. My property? Yes, Mom. The documents were brought in yesterday afternoon. They appear to be for a transfer of ownership from you to your daughter, Elaine Harper. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood her. I am not transferring my house to anyone. I understand, she said carefully. That is why I called. The air seemed to leave the room. I lowered myself into the kitchen chair. What exactly did she submit? Mrs. Harper presented a prepared quitclaim deed and supporting documents. She said you wanted to transfer the property to her so she could handle it for you. She said that? Yes. She also stated you had recently become forgetful after a fall and preferred not to come into the office. I gripped the edge of the table. I had a broken wrist. I did not lose my mind. I did not assume you had, Dana said gently. But the packet had an issue. What issue? The signature page was not included. I closed my eyes. What signature page? The final page of the deed. The page requiring your notarized signature and acknowledgement. I could hear papers shifting on her desk. Your daughter, said the notary had completed everything and that the missing page may have been left in her car. But the rest of the paperwork was dated February 9th. My fingers went cold. February 9th. I knew that date without having to think. It was the day I had been admitted to St. Agnes Pace Medical Center after my fall. I had spent that entire day in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm and a nurse checking my blood pressure every few hours. Elaine had sat beside me that afternoon and held my hand. She had brought me soup I could not eat. She had told me she was there to help. "Mrs. Clark?" Dana asked quietly. "Are you still with me?" "Yes," I whispered. "I'm here. Would you be willing to come in tomorrow morning with identification? I have placed the packet on hold. No recording will happen until we confirm your wishes." "Yes," I said again, stronger this time. "I will be there." When I hung up, I sat alone in the kitchen for a long while. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. On the table beside me was the blue folder Elaine had made for my important papers. I opened it carefully. My bank statements were there. My insurance forms were there. My tax receipts were there. But the house folder was gone. Not misplaced. Gone. That was when I stopped telling myself. My daughter was simply overprotective. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Lorna Bell. Because Lorna had known Elaine since she was 10 years old, and because she had watched my house during the days I was in the hospital. "Rebecca," she said the moment she heard my voice, "are you all right? I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Of course. Did you see Elaine here on February 9th? There was silence on the line. Then Lorna said, "Yes." "Why? What time?" "Late afternoon. Around 4, maybe. She came by with a man carrying a black case. I assumed he was from the hospital or your insurance. My heart began to pound. Did they go inside?" "Yes." "Elaine used her key. They were there about 20 minutes. Did you see what the man was doing?" "No, honey. I only saw him hold some papers against the hood of his car when they came back out." Elaine looked upset, or hurried. I couldn't tell. I pressed one hand against my chest. "Did she say anything to you?" "She said she was handling some things because you were resting." That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing Elaine standing beside my hospital bed, looking worried and tired. I kept hearing her say, "I'm going to help you get everything organized." And underneath that memory came another one, quieter but more troubling. The night before my fall, Elaine had asked whether I still kept my driver's license in the little tray by the back door. At the time, I thought it was an odd question. Now I wondered why she had needed to know. The next morning, I placed my driver's license, hospital discharge papers, property tax statement, and the mortgage satisfaction letter into my purse. Then I locked every door in my house. Not because I believed Elaine would come while I was gone. Not yet. But because for the first time in my life, the key she carried no longer felt like a symbol of trust. It felt like evidence. And when I walked into the recorder's office at 9 o'clock the next morning, Dana Mitchell was waiting for me with a thick manila envelope on her desk. She looked at my identification, looked at me, and then slid the unrecorded transfer packet across the counter. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "before we discuss the missing signature page, there is something else you need to see." On top of the stack was a photocopy of my driver's license. It was mine, but the address printed beneath my name was not. Dana watched my face as I stared at the photocopy. The license number was mine. The photograph was mine. Even my name was mine. But the address beneath it had been changed to Elaine's apartment. For a long moment, I could not speak. "That is not where I live," I finally said. "I know," Dana replied. "Our property system and your tax records both list the Willow Creek address. That discrepancy was one reason I stopped the filing." She drew another document from the envelope. It was a typed statement titled "Owner's Intent to Transfer." My name was printed at the bottom. Underneath it was a signature that looked enough like mine to make my stomach turn. Not because it was good, because it was almost good. The first letter leaned too far to the right, the loop in my B was too tight, and the final K in Clark had been written with a flourish I had never used in my life. William used to tease me about my signature. He said it looked like a row of tired little fences. That signature was not mine. "I didn't sign this," I said. Dana nodded. "I believed you might say that." Her voice remained calm, but I could hear a carefulness in it now. The kind people use when they understand they are no longer dealing with a simple paperwork error. "There is a notary seal on the statement," she continued. The packet says you appeared before a notary named Peter Caldwell on February 9th. My daughter said a man came to my house that day, I said. But I was in the hospital. Dana looked at me directly. Do you have proof you were admitted that day? I have my discharge papers. Bring those to your attorney. And Mrs. Clark, I would strongly suggest you speak with one today. I had spent years helping people at the library find legal aid forms, veterans' benefits guides, housing applications, and records they were too embarrassed to ask for. But when it came to my own life, I had never imagined needing an attorney because of my daughter. Still, I knew exactly who to call. Maya Hayes had helped William and me update our wills after he became ill. She was younger than me, sharp without being cold, and she had the rare gift of telling the truth without making a person feel foolish for needing to hear it. Her receptionist found an opening for me that afternoon. I took the documents home first, not because I wanted to be alone with them, but because I needed to understand what Elaine had tried to do before I walked into anyone else's office. I spread the paperwork across my dining room table. There was the incomplete quitclaim deed. There was the fake copy of my license. There was the statement claiming I wished to transfer my home to Elaine out of love, trust, and a desire to simplify future care decisions. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Out of love. She had used the language of motherhood as cover for taking my home. I read the statement twice, then a third time. Elaine had not claimed I was selling the house. She had claimed I was giving it to her. That meant she would not owe me a penny. The house William and I had paid for over 34 years, the house where he took his last breath with my hand in his, was supposed to pass quietly into Elaine's name as if I had simply become tired of owning it. Then I found a page near the back of the packet that made my hands shake. It was an authorization for Elaine to speak with my insurance company, my mortgage lender, and any prospective real estate professional regarding the property. There was no mortgage lender anymore. The house had been paid off for 11 years. But Elaine knew that. She had helped me celebrate the day William and I mailed in the final payment. We had taken a picture on the porch holding up the letter like a trophy. The realization came slowly. She was not trying to take over my property because she was worried about me. She was trying to make it easy to sell. At Maya Hayes' office, I sat across from her desk while she read every page without interrupting. She wore thin glasses low on her nose and kept a legal pad beside her, writing notes in neat, hard strokes. When she finished, she folded her hands. Rebecca, I want to be precise, she said. The deed was not recorded. That means the transfer did not go through. I let out a breath I had been holding since Dana's call. But, Maya continued, the attempted filing matters. A document was submitted using your personal information. The date may place you in the hospital at the time of the supposed acknowledgement, and the signature appears questionable. We need to preserve every record before anyone has a chance to explain it away. What do I do? You do not call Elaine yet. The answer surprised me. She is my daughter. I understand. But if she has documents, messages, drafts, or contact information that could explain where this came from, confronting her first may give her time to destroy or reshape the evidence. That sounded harsh. But the truth was, I had already been protecting Elaine in my mind. I had been telling myself there had to be a misunderstanding. That maybe someone in her office had pushed papers in front of her. That perhaps she had panicked after my fall and made one terrible decision she did not fully understand. Maya must have seen something on my face. Rebecca, she said more softly, being someone's mother does not require you to make their choices sound better than they are. I looked down at my hands. My left wrist still ached in cold weather from the fall. A faint scar ran along the side where the IV had been. She sat beside my hospital bed, I said. She held my hand that day. Maya did not rush to fill the silence. Finally, she said, then that fact belongs in the record too. For the next hour, we made a list. Maya asked for the name of my hospital, the date and time I had been admitted, the names of any neighbors who had seen Elaine at my house, the date I had handed Elaine the original deed, any messages she had sent about putting my documents somewhere safe. I remembered a text from her. I found it while sitting in Maya's reception area. It had been sent the Saturday Elaine took the deed. Got your house paperwork secured, Mom. One less thing for you to stress over. Love you. There was a red heart at the end. I stared at it until the words blurred. Maya printed the screenshot and added it to the file. Then she called the recorder's office with me present. Dana agreed to preserve the complete submission packet, including the date it had been received, the identification Elaine presented, and the name of the employee who had accepted it. After that, Maya contacted the Ohio Secretary of State's Notary Division to verify Peter Caldwell's commission. His name was real. His commission was active. But that did not mean he had actually seen me sign anything. Notaries keep journals in some circumstances, but procedures vary, Maya explained after the call. We will request what exists. We will also ask whether Mr. Caldwell recognizes the documents and whether he performed any acknowledgement for you. Could Elaine have fooled him? It is possible someone could misrepresent a situation. It is also possible someone knowingly helped. We do not guess. We gather proof. That was the first thing Maya said that made me feel steady again. We do not guess. We gather proof. By the time I returned home, the sun had dropped low behind the trees. My house looked exactly as it had that morning. Brick walls, white shutters, hydrangeas beginning to green along the porch. But I did not see it the same way. It no longer felt like a safe place I had taken for granted. It felt like something I had to defend. That evening, Elaine called. I watched her name light up my phone. For several rings, I could not make myself answer. Then I did. "Hi, Mom," she said brightly. "How are you feeling today?" Her voice was so normal that it made my throat tighten. I went to the recorder's office. Silence. Not a long silence, but long enough. Then she said, "Why would you do that?" "Because they called me." Her breathing changed. "Mom, I was going to explain everything." "No," I said. "You were going to record my house in your name. That is not what happened." "The paperwork says it is. You are looking at it wrong." I almost laughed. But there was no humor in me. How exactly am I looking at it wrong? Because you don't understand how these things work. It was just a protective transfer. You would still live there. Nothing had to change. Nothing had to change except who owned my home. I wasn't going to take your home. You submitted a deed. You told me you wanted help. I told you I wanted help organizing my papers. Elaine's voice sharpened. "Mom, this is exactly why I worried. You forget what you say, then you get upset and accuse people of things." I closed my eyes. There it was. The lie she had told the county clerk, now delivered directly to me. I had thought the most painful part would be discovering the paperwork. I was wrong. The most painful part was hearing my own daughter test the lie on me to see if it would make me doubt myself. "I was in the hospital on February 9th, I said. "That is the date on the notary statement." She was quiet again. Then she said, "I had a lot on my mind that week." "Did you take someone into my house while I was in the hospital?" "Mom, don't start making this bigger than it is." "Did you?" "I was trying to keep things from becoming a mess." "A mess for whom?" Her voice broke then, but not in the way I expected. She sounded angry. "For me, okay? For all of us. You act like you are going to live forever, and you leave me to figure everything out when something happens." I stood beside the kitchen counter, one hand pressed flat against the cool laminate. "Your father and I made plans," I said. "I have a will. I have insurance. I have a home. And I have the right to decide what happens to it while I am alive. You don't need to talk to me like I'm some criminal. I do not know what you are yet, Elaine. But I know you lied about me." She hung up. For a few minutes, I stood there listening to the empty line. Then I did something I should have done much earlier. I called a locksmith. The next morning, he replaced every exterior lock on my house. I did not enjoy doing it. When he handed me the new keys, I sat in my car and cried. Not because I regretted it, because every time I looked at those keys, I remembered the first spare one William and I had given Elaine when she moved into her first apartment. We had told her, "Home is always here if you need it." I had meant it, but a home is not an inheritance someone gets to collect before the owner is gone. Over the next 3 days, Maya's office began receiving answers. The hospital sent certified records confirming I had been admitted at 10:18 that morning and remained under observation through the evening. A nurse's note showed Elaine had signed in as a visitor at 3:42 p.m. The exact hour Mrs. Bell had seen Elaine arrive at my house with a man carrying a black case. Dana from the recorder's office found something else. Elaine had not walked in alone when she submitted the packet. She had been accompanied by a man whose name was written in the visitor log as Peter Caldwell, the notary. Maya requested a formal response through his contact information. He replied the next day through an attorney. His attorney did not deny that he had notarized a document connected to Elaine, but he claimed he had been told I was resting in a back bedroom and unable to come to the door because of medication. According to him, Elaine had brought him a signed page and a copy of my identification. He said he had notarized the signature based on her representation that I had signed it earlier. Maya read the letter once, then placed it on her desk. He is not supposed to notarize a signature he did not witness or properly verify, she said. His explanation does not solve his problem. It creates more questions. Will he lose his commission? That is for the state to determine. Our concern is making sure your property remains protected and that the attempted fraud is documented. Maya then asked the question I had been avoiding. Rebecca, do you know why Elaine needed this to happen now? I shook my head. She has been behind on some bills, I said. At least, she mentioned things were tight. But she works full-time. Did she ever ask you for money? Not directly. Did she ask you to sign anything else? I thought about it. Then I remembered a lunch we had shared 2 months before my fall. Elaine had been distracted, checking her phone between bites of soup. She had asked whether I would ever consider taking out a home equity loan. I told her no. William and I had worked too hard to own our house free and clear. At the time, she said she was only curious because a client at work had been discussing it. Now I wondered whether that client had been her. Maya asked permission to pull public property and court records connected to Elaine and her husband, Marcus. By the following week, we had an answer. Marcus's small contracting business had been sued by a supplier for unpaid materials. The case was still pending, but a court filing showed they owed more than $60,000. Then Maya found a second document. It was a notice of default on Elaine's apartment lease. They were 3 months behind. I stared at the page without feeling satisfaction. All I felt was sorrow mixed with anger. Elaine had been struggling. She had been afraid. And instead of coming to me honestly, instead of saying, Mom, I made a mess and I need help, she had looked at my home and seen a way out. That did not excuse what she had done, but it explained why she had rushed. The following Friday, Dana called Maya's office with one final detail. Before Elaine submitted the quitclaim deed, someone had contacted the recorder's office asking what documents would be needed to transfer a property into an adult child's name without the owner appearing in person. The caller had given Elaine's name, and when Dana told the caller that an owner's signed, notarized acknowledgement would still be required, the caller asked a second question. Would the county know if the owner was in the hospital? I sat very still as Maya read that note aloud. The room felt smaller, not because I was afraid anymore, because the truth had become too clear to look away from. Elaine had not made one panicked mistake. She had planned, she had asked questions, she had waited until I was injured, and she had counted on me being too tired, too trusting, or too ashamed to fight back. Maya slid a new sheet of paper toward me. It was a draft letter demanding that Elaine return the original deed, cease all attempts to transfer or market my home, and preserve every document, message, and communication related to the property. At the bottom was a line for my signature. This time, I read every word. Then I picked up the pen. But before I could sign, Maya's receptionist appeared in the doorway. Miss Hayes, she said quietly. There's a woman here asking for Mrs. Clark. Maya looked at me. Who is it? The receptionist swallowed. Elaine. And she says she has something your mother needs to see. For a moment, I could not answer. My first instinct was to tell the receptionist I was too tired, that I did not want another conversation where I had to listen to my own daughter rearrange the truth until it hurt less. Then I looked at the preservation letter on Maya's desk. My name was waiting at the bottom. The same name Elaine had tried to imitate, the same name she had used in a false statement to make herself look like my protector. Let her come in, I said. Elaine entered with her shoulders drawn inward. She had no makeup on, and her hair, usually smoothed into place, was pulled back in a loose knot. In one hand, she held a thick brown envelope. In the other, she gripped her phone so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale. She stopped just inside the doorway. Mom, I did not get up. Maya did. Mrs. Harper, she said evenly. You may sit. Before we begin, I need you to understand that I represent your mother. She has already received legal advice. If you discuss the deed transfer or related documents, I may need to preserve what you say. Elaine nodded once. I understand. She sat across from me, placed the envelope on Maya's desk, and pushed it forward. The deed is in there, she said. The original one. Maya opened the envelope carefully. There it was. The green folder from my filing cabinet. The one William had labeled house in black marker with his steady, square handwriting. For years, that folder had stayed exactly where it belonged. I could picture it in the metal cabinet near my dining room table, resting beside the folder that held our wills, and the one containing old photographs of Elaine as a little girl. Maya lifted the deed from inside. The edges were bent. There was a faint coffee stain near the lower corner. Such a small detail, but it made my chest ache. My original deed had been sitting on someone's table while strangers planned what to do with my life. Beneath the deed were several printed pages. Maya scanned them silently. Then she looked up at Elaine. Is this a listing agreement? Elaine lowered her eyes. Yes. The paper was dated 2 days after the incomplete quitclaim deed had been submitted to the county. It authorized a real estate agent named Brent Lowell to quietly prepare my house for an off-market sale after ownership transferred to Elaine. The suggested asking price was $220,000. Maya had already told me that comparable homes on my street had recently sold for far more than that. I looked at Elaine. You were going to sell my house? Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered. That is not an answer. I was scared. So you took my deed, Marcus said. I held up one hand. No, do not begin with what Marcus said. You were my daughter before you were his wife. You were standing beside my hospital bed. You were the person I trusted with that folder. Elaine looked down at her hands. The silence in Maya's office stretched between us. Then Elaine began to cry. Not loudly, not in a way that asked anyone to rush toward her. Still, I felt the old reflex move through me. The reflex of a mother who sees her child hurting and wants to make the pain stop, even before she knows whether that pain is deserved. But I kept my hands folded in my lap. Maya spoke first. Rebecca has a right to a full explanation. Start with the deed. Elaine wiped her cheeks. When Mom fell, I was already behind on rent. Marcus's company owed money to a supplier. He kept saying it would get better if one job came through, but it didn't. That is not why you took my home, I said. No, she admitted. It is why I let myself believe it was the only way out. She opened her phone and slid it across the desk. There are messages from Marcus. I saved them. Maya did not touch the phone. Instead, she asked Elaine to email the messages to her attorney so they could be preserved properly. Elaine did. Then she continued. Marcus asked whether you had a will. He asked whether the house was paid off. I told him it was. But I told him you would never sell it. I remembered that lunch from months earlier. Elaine asking whether I had ever considered a home equity loan, her eyes drifting toward.